All right, so I'm going to explain what I know of the pyramids, and I don't know anything. All right, now let's just establish a couple things first. Okay, so this box keeps showing up in a lot of things. Okay, and it keeps a red star that gives these people power. It's over these people's heads too. Okay, now here's the transmitter and receiver. Now, Tesla, when it come to Wardenclyffe Tower, I believe that was only half of it. He was only working on one of those. Okay, as I was explaining with these staffs, you can hone in radiostatic energy. Okay, but the magnetic field around the staff has to be larger than the energy that you're trying to use. Anyway, I'm digressing. Okay, he only had one. He hadn't even began on the other one, and this would be analogous to a cathode and anode. Okay, now this is going to be the arc or the Ankh. Okay, it's the power of the star. See, and here it shows up again. The Sphinx power plant is what I call it, because the Sphinx is definitely the center of this too. Okay, this tomb. Imagine this is the exact same pattern. Now, this right here fits perfectly in these spark boxes. Okay, it has all the same stuff, even an anode and a cathode. Okay, and it's the power of the sun or the star. Now notice that looks like nuclear rods, and I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, now this is going to use thermodynamics, and this is going to be the cold in the king's chamber. Okay, there's a hot and a cold in the king's chamber. Just like in the nuclear room, there's a hot and a cold. Okay, so in the king's chamber with this spark box, it's open arc plasma. Okay, it's got a hot and a cold, which is the sarcophagi. Now this whole thing's going to be hot like a radiator is to a car. But even if it's still hot, it's not as hot as this process that's going on. So this hot steam that's going to be pressurized around this is actually helping cool this at the same time that arc is traveling through that steam, breaking down molecules for fusion. And the alpha particles in this are being extracted, well, not necessarily extracted, decay from radium, because radium is 1,000,000 times more nuclear than uranium. Therefore, the box for this little nuclear reactor didn't have to be using tons of uranium like we do. And these alpha particles are going to be fused, creating a red star. It's a lithium star. And lithium hydroxide is going to be produced, which is actually going to be processed into it, decay, and just create more hydrogen. It's a circular process. Now, that hot is also being transmitted here because the case of this is transistor material. Now, we have our nuclear reactor in a concrete vault. Imagine all that concrete isn't just straight concrete, but it's transistor. Okay, now you can see how you hook the ground or the base, you hook the ground and the hot up. Okay, this is going to heat this up, which is ultimately going to amplify the signal. This is one reason I believe that we can use transistors in reverse if we configure them properly. You can just heat it up with the sun and it'll create energy. So imagine this right here is just a capacitor that's discharging, a nuclear capacitor that's discharging inside a transistor. See, right here, it's telling you, see this Ankh of power in this guy's hand. He's a powerful guy. He's got the Ankh, okay? It's carried through the air. Now, the Queen's Chamber is the beta, okay? That's why it's pointed towards beta Ursa Minor. This is the alpha, okay? It's the hot and the cold, okay? Now, this is still scorching because this is transmitting and receiving energy, but at the same time, the water that they're using to cool this is creating the steam, which is helping cool this at the same time, giving it fuel to fuse. Because it's steam and it's breaking it down. No different than electrolysis, but they're using high-pressure steam. Now, we retard our nuclear reactors because we dumb it down to steam and try to keep it from going into meltdown. Then that steam turns a turbine, which transmits energy, which is processes that's a lot of entropy. That's a lot of energy loss. Now, since we have the king's this is the king's chamber, the hot and the cold in that. Now you have the cooler one, which is the queen's chamber. Well, actually, it's right here. See, that's this chamber right here. That's the grand gallery, essentially, in our nuclear reactors. And as in a thermocouple, okay? Now, the cold junction point, the junction here, this that connects the cold to the hot, that's actually the body of the pyramid, which is the concrete vault around our nuclear reactors. Ra is also sun god, which is radium. Okay, see how we dumb ours down to get steam, then we use the steam to turn a turbine. That's a lot of energy loss. Not to mention the fact when it turns into water vapor, we can recondense that and feed it back into the system. But we just let it escape and turn into whatever gases, basically. Then it basically recondenses and turns back into rain. See, basically this acts as the heat exchanger. But there's a lot of parts missing off this thing. All the metals have been pillaged and turned into gold and figurines and all that, and every continent basically or anywhere there's pyramids. Around the same time they were dug up, most likely. So here we go again with another one. Okay, here's the king's chamber, here's the queen's chamber. Here, well, the queen's chamber is technically this, but this is the heat exchanger. See, there's all kinds of configurations. This is actually also the subterranean chamber. You see, this is where the water is going to come in and condense and cool this at the same time. It turns into steam. When it cools this, is hot steam, and it's being ionized. And all that heat's being transmitted. This is like a diode into the casing, which is transisting it into the energy, which is making this red. And then it's transmitting it here through the air. It's like a giant thermodynamic nuclear LC circuit. The Ark of the Covenant is the capacitor here, and it's like a transistor that transmits energy, a transmission like a Tesla coil, and it's also a radio receiver, which is radio, because radi means emission, light, or radium. And this right here, see, this diode would be transmitting this here into the Queen's chamber, which is coming to your ear, which is the capstone. See, the diode into the Queen's chamber, the diode into the Queen's chamber, which is transmitting out the sound, which is transmitting out the wireless energy. Now, on the talk, I'm just throwing this out here for a good measure. You know, it's got a magnitude. It's a supergiant. It's a blue supergiant, which indicates the blue plasma in the King's chamber. It's 6.0 magnitude. All the numbers of these stars are not arbitrary. They're actually indicating how this thing works. See, in the Queen's chamber points toward the dog star, okay, Sirius A and B, which means glowing or scorching.